Okay, so as usual, I've got my two screens up and running. If you have a question, just put it in the chat box while we're busy and while we're going to go through what we're going to go through tonight. And I'll get your questions as we go on. And I'll just admit people as they come in. We'll give them a minute or two. But for now, while you are sitting there, family, because we're going to discuss family dynamics and childhood trauma. And that's a huge subject. Okay, it's quite an amazing subject if you start to unpack it and if you start to unravel what family dynamics are, how they affect us, how they interact, and how the family system wants to have balance. Then it becomes an interesting journey that you take. And it goes very, very deep because you can imagine you have ancestors, grandpa, great-grandpa, great-grandma, great ancestors. Their DNA actually flows through your system. So you've got strings of their DNA coming down the family lineage. And that is actually amazing because you are carrying your past in your body. And if that is the case, if we delve deeper into family dynamics, this whole family system that we have, okay, that you may be a part of, it used to be that people think a perfect family is a mom and a dad and children. Okay, those things don't exist worldwide. Sure, you need a mom and a dad to make children, but the family dynamic that happens afterwards is not necessarily as simple as that. Okay. And as it is not that simple, we try and look for answers in family dynamics and what the purpose is of family dynamics. Now, I know Dr. DeMartini said it the best when he actually started with some of the analysis of family dynamics. And he said, every system, doesn't matter what system it is, wants to achieve balance. And a family system is exactly the same. It also wants to achieve balance. So it wants to achieve harmony. Now, what does that mean? In different families, you've got different family members. Each family member is a part of a unit that wants balance. So, for instance, if you have two children coming out of the same household and they're opposites day and night, they were brought up with the same value systems, they were brought up with the same rules and regulations, they were brought up with the same financial structures, same love and attention, but they are two totally different people. Then people are like, that's weird. How can these siblings come out of the same family? And even if you go to the level of identical twins, they're not the same. So there are differences. Now, these differences, if you have somebody in the family systems that's suppressing something, another family member will live it out. And that is quite interesting if you start to look at it. Because say you have an introvert somewhere in the family, then somewhere in the family dynamics, somebody has to be quite extrovert in certain situations to balance it out. And if that's the case, then we look at the person showing up in the family unit. Are they showing up as the person? Are they taking their space in the family unit? And it becomes a very interesting conversation surrounding that. And this is where the childhood trauma sets in. Now, if you're a child, imagine every one of us sitting on this call, every one of us here, we were born totally helpless, totally dependent on people around us, totally dependent on our families, on our parents, on whoever. And that dependency is actually fascinating because none of us arrived on this planet fully formed, fully functioning. We're dependent on a structure. So now you go as a baby into a family structure and you start developing in this structure. And you pick up certain value systems, you pick up certain fears, certain perceptions that might not be true, and you just carry on with them without questioning them ever. And usually, if you ask people, what is your purpose in the family? They're like, yeah, I don't know. I'm the little brother. I'm the father. I'm the mother. I'm the aunt. I'm the cousin. I'm the younger brother, younger sister. They've got labels, but what does that mean? How do you show up in the family unit as that? What are your responsibilities? What are you bringing to the table? What are you bringing to the family system? That is important to ask. And as you grow up as a child, your values, your perceptions, everything that you learn comes from authority figures, the people around you, school, society. And sometimes these things clash. Okay. Sometimes these things clash and they actually cause trauma. Now, when we say childhood trauma, people think, oh, but then that must be abuse, and that must be physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, all those things. No, it doesn't have to go that deep. Okay. If you have a child in a family structure and this child wants to live out their value systems and actually explore who they are, and they get suppressed by the family system, that's abuse. That's trauma. It might not be so obvious and you might not see it, but that child will grow up, and somewhere along the line, and I've seen this a lot in my practice, that dynamic causes trauma for the child. And then they get to their mid-30s and some things just bomb out. Some patterns are re-emerging, some emotions come up, some anxiety, stress, depression, whatever comes up, and they realize, but sure, when they were younger, they had certain things that where they wanted to live out their value systems, and they were suppressed by the family structure. Now, what to do about this? If we understand this, if you understand this, if you are in a family dynamic, and I love the one where people say, oh, my family is very toxic. It's like, yeah, not really. If you take a step back and you look at the family dynamics, it's just a system playing out, and you were put in that system and you didn't show up as you in the system. So if you find yourself in a toxic family, that means you realize the family is toxic, or whatever label you want to put, but then you must play the part or the role that helps you to facilitate change within the family dynamic and in yourself. But that takes a bit of courage. So a lot of kids take a lot of responsibility on themselves for the family structure if something is not happening right. And for instance, if you want an example, when parents are using a child in a divorce, they're using the child to actually hurt the other party. And that happens more often than not. It's a terrible thing to witness, but it does happen. Now the child has to take responsibility for one side's emotions and the other side's emotions, and they want to protect that one, protect the other one. What do you think is going to happen to that child? What do you think is going to happen to that child's emotional intelligence? It happened to that child's acceptance, happened to that child's self-worth. That child's going to get lost along the way. So children take responsibility for their parents. And it's very funny because most of the parents don't show up as parents. They want to be their best friend. They want to be the child's best friend, and they must be best friends with their children. That doesn't work. You've got best friends and you've got children. There's a hierarchy. Everything in nature has a hierarchy. Now, we are not different. If we are born into a family structure and there's a hierarchical structure in the family structure, why do we want to abolish that and say, okay, but no, we're all equal in this family? We may be all equal as human beings, but there's a structural alignment in the family with certain responsibilities and certain communication skills and certain roles that need balancing out. If you destroy that hierarchy, what happens? There is no essence. Okay, then the foundation of the family structure actually takes a bit of a knock. Now, if you think about families around the globe today, and especially today, it's amazing how weird it gets when you see the type of family units that are out there. It's not just mom, dad, and children. It can be mom and children, dad and children, two males and children, three couples and children, grandma and grandchild. Okay, even just siblings helping each other without parents. So the family dynamics are very weird. So if we take a step back and we look at the energetic structure of families, what is needed to create a family or to create a baby? Male energy, female energy. Now that male and female energy comes again in with roles. If you have, because we all know, we forget it, but we all know that nature has certain energetic properties. If you think of a male lion and a female lion, we're in South Africa because we can use that analogy. So we know about lions, all the dangerous animals, and the big five. If you ever think about nature, and especially like a lion, a male lion and a female lion, not just the look, but the energetic system that, or the energetic system that you pick up from that animal is different. If you have a male and female dog, if you have a male and female whatever, okay, you pick up certain energetic differences in these things. It's not different with us humans. So we've got energetic structure in the family, we've got a physical structure in the family. And now when those things are not honored, learned from, and even awareness of it does not exist, what happens to a child? What happens to a child that wants to communicate and grow? And it's fascinating because most people think that children should explore from the day they are born till the age of 27. Now, 27, you're not really a child anymore. You're more or less a grown up, but that is quite a nice age. That's where you need to explore. What happens if you can't explore? If you have to take on responsibilities for your family? If there's situations, is that right or wrong? It is neither. It is just what it is with family dynamics. Now it turns into trauma when you cannot resolve it, when you cannot have quick answers for your questions of what happened during childhood. And this is where subconscious work is actually quite amazing. I think this is where it actually is a bit better than most other things out there. When you can go in, and people talk about this inner child work, inner child work, inner child work, but we all have an inner child in us. And that child is the foundation of our experience with life. And if it's true that we learn up to 95% of our survival skills up to the age of 7, with emotional interactions, things, how we protect our emotions, what happens in life, what happens in the family structure, then it's a bit rough. Because then you build a foundation and you weren't even aware if that foundation was good or bad for you. You weren't even aware if that foundation was aligned with your values or not. Then it is nice to go inside and reflect and work around the inner child problems that you may or may not have. And I can guarantee you, with all the amounts of people I've worked with over the years, 95% and above, a lot of the problem stems from childhood and things that happened when they were younger, and things that were said by a parent, or things that were done by a grandparent, or the list goes on and on and on. So childhood trauma, no matter what, if the family structure is perfect, if the family structure is toxic, this is traumatic for a child. Because if you arrive on this planet as a being totally helpless, totally new experiences all the time, and if you see young children, they look around and they're quite keen on life and they have this energy and this curiosity and this joy, and then it starts to diminish. Okay, because what happens to that little being, that little entity, with the joy, with the value systems that they are bringing to this life? They start to get educated. They start to learn about problems. They start to learn about emotions. They start to learn about neglect, misunderstanding, miscommunications. All these things flow into this little child. And then eventually there is trauma. Now, if your own childhood traumas are not clear, how can you start addressing them? Well, the universe will show you. And there are certain people that will show up in your life, and you'll have communication with them, and they'll press buttons. There are certain patterns that might repeat itself over and over again. And once that happens, you know, okay, well, maybe it's time to sit back, take a step back and delve. Okay, might be something as simple as success. Whatever success is for you, and you aim for it and you just don't achieve it, and it's just like the cycle, you know, take a step back. And that is the good example, because one of the institutions I studied through, one of the case studies was a guy who built up successful businesses, and then as the business starts to make money and become stable, sabotage, it gets destroyed. And he had these patterns going and going and going, and he was wondering, okay, but what the hell? So one of my teachers actually had him as a client, and they regressed him in a session, in a hypnosis session, back to when he was, I think he was about 5 or 6, and he was busy planting plants, and with the little plants and the roots, he had to plant a wooden structure so the plant can be supported by the wooden structure. And he planted one of them skew. And his dad at the time was didn't help him right. He said, "Oh, what are you doing? Why planting that thing skew? This plant will not grow, and you'll be responsible for the plant not growing right, and you won't be successful at anything ever, because this is just stupid." That little sentence stuck with him while he was younger. And every time he had the success coming up, he sabotaged because his dad said he wouldn't achieve success. It's very funny what happens in the subconscious mind. But that's the type of thing that's serious. You can imagine a 6-year-old being told that by the dad. If you as a grown-up would look at the scene and you sit back and you think, okay, well, that grown-up said that, how can this be so serious? That was a traumatic event for this person. So the grown-up in us will judge things and go, but that's silly. But the internal child, the inner child, will not see it as silly at all. And this is where we have to come in with our analysis of what is childhood trauma, what is it for you? And it's not about blaming the people who caused it. people carry around so much hate. And it's like, my dad did this, I'll hate him forever. My mom did this, I'll hate her forever. Grandparents, that. But once we go back, and once we get that inner child equilibrated and balanced, and they now see the grandparent or the parent, things change. There's an emotional shift that happens with people. And that you have to realize. Okay, it's not about the other people. It's not about what they did and what they did not do. It's not about the abuse or the neglect or the name it. I've seen a lot. And there's a lot of people that went through some serious, serious trauma. But if we expand a little bit wider and we go into family dynamics, and that inner child that got the attention, got the lesson, and understood family dynamics, then the thought changes. And then that trauma of children gets released. And that trauma is not so heavy. It's not a burden that people carry anymore. And that's quite amazing to witness. Because what actually happens? Well, nothing. It's something that happens in the past. It's more like an imagination. Anything that happened to you in the past does not exist now where you sit. Okay, anything that happened to you when you were a child does not exist now where you sit. It exists in here. So your mind can latch onto it. It can go back. It can make a whole scene surrounding that and carry it. And if your mind carries it, your body will feel it. And then we start to be depressed, anxious, sad, whatever. And then you can take a step back and go, but wait a minute, where did I learn these emotions? What was my experience of these emotions? Sometimes you can pick it up, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it takes a bit of effort, sometimes it doesn't. It just pops up. And most of the time, I love to ask the people the question, okay, where did you first learn about depression or sadness or frustration, whatever you use to label that word? And most of the time they can pick it up. They say, yes, I remember it clearly. It was this day, I was this young boy, young girl, this happened, and they can explain the events surrounding it. The event is not that clear, but the emotion that the event caused is always clear, always. And that emotion is what we want to equilibrate or balance out. So when you are experiencing something yourself, if you're experiencing childhood trauma, if you're experiencing frustrating family dynamics, take a step back and see yourself as part of the puzzle. What role does that require you to play? And sometimes it requires you to take a step back. It requires you to remove yourself from the situation. And that's a difficult thing for most people to do because you feel an obligation towards family members, towards the people in your circles, in your area, in your immediate vicinity, the people you live with. And once you have that obligation to them, it's very difficult to take a step back. But if you have to save yourself, you have to save yourself. It's not a selfish thing to do, it's your role. Because what happens if you don't save yourself and you still remain the victim, the abusee, the whatever you want to call it? You need to step out, play your role as the person who will heal, who will grow, who will become stronger, so these people can see what's happening. But if you just allow everything to continue, you're not playing your part, you're not playing your role, you're not playing or showing up in the family dynamic as you should. And that requires a bit of courage. That requires a bit of communication. That's not always easy and not always acceptable for most people. But incidentally, if they don't accept it, you'll know they don't really care about you. And they're trying to manipulate your feelings, manipulate everything. Because if they really care about you, they'll have a discussion with you, a grown-up discussion, and not bring in their inner child. And if you start to observe people, really observe them without labels, without judgment, it is funny how you can pick up the family dynamics, the things people say, the little nuances and the little proclivities that they have surrounding their own families. And you take a step back and you see how they absorb each other. Like children will have the language of their parents. The things that they say when they become parents, they have the exact same language as their parents used to have, the exact same mannerisms. And you're like, wow, where does the cycle end? Should the cycle end? Well, of course, yes. You are an individual. If we are all individuals with individual fingerprints, eyes, even ears, almost 7.5 billion of us, if we're individual, then you should show up as an individual in your family and bring to it what you can, what you cannot. And once you show up as that, then it becomes fascinating. Now, if you label yourself as a brother, a mother, a father, a cousin, a this, a that, whatever. Okay, that label, you must be very clear of what it means for you. If you show up as a son, for instance, what is a son's purpose towards a mother, towards a father? Is it to be subdued? Is it to be patient? Is it to be loving? Is it to be always obeying? What is it to show up as a son? Is it to be your dad's best friend? Is it to be your mom's protector? You must find out what that is for you. And you cannot really find that out without communicating and without showing up in the family dynamic. But if you were a child and you picked up the responsibilities of your parents, you actually picked up all these things that you took responsibility for. When you grow older, you will probably resent your parents, or resent your authority figures, or resent the people you lived with. Okay. It is not about resentment, it's about becoming aware of the family dynamics that may or may not have caused you trauma, and then working through them. Because if we start to blame, it doesn't feel nice. If we start, oh, my dad did this, this is why I'm like this. Oh, my uncle did this, this is why I have this. No, there was an event. We can rather say, I will choose to fix this negative pattern because of the actions of the other person. I'm not blaming the other person. The other person was a feedback mechanism for me to get to myself, to get to a better place, and to start healing. But that takes a level of honesty. Okay, and incidentally, if you're in a family, imagine all families were honest all the time. Do you see that usually? There's no way. There's no way that all families are honest all the time, because when you delve a little deeper, somewhere in the family structure, people will hide things from each other and lie, and things will come out that they will be shocked. It's like, oh, yes, I can't believe this was happening. I was staying in the same house with this person and I didn't even pick it up. But if you take a step back, you'll pick up a lot of those things without judgment, without labeling it, because it is a strange reality that as soon as we start to observe things and we start to judge them, we take a skill and a sense away that we actually have. For instance, we just sit and watch two people interacting, and you try and guess their emotions. This one's angry, this one's upset, that one's fighting, this one is loving, this one is soft, this one is kind, this one is the bully, this one is the subdued one. It becomes a freak show, okay? Because our nervous systems gather information in little packets, and they make summaries of what reality is around us. Now we become the savior. We become certain that that person is a bully, that person is angry, that person is upset. No, you are labeling stuff that you don't know anything about because you're summarizing. And that summary might be correct according to what you've been taught, but rather take a step back and say, okay, wow, this person is voice raised. This person's body posture is like this. I don't know what it means, but I'll keep on observing. If you keep on observing, you'll find more peace within yourself and calmness within yourself in your own family structure, because you'll start to observe your own family structures. And if you observe it without judgment, if you observe it without labeling, then it becomes a very interesting ballgame. Then the inner child can surface and go, wow, yes, I wonder what that did to me as a child. I wonder how this inner child would react to a parent doing that to their child, or a parent talking like this, or a mother neglecting this, or a mother saying this, or a father saying that. Then you are starting to ask questions, but you're asking empowered questions from an empowered point of view. But if you start to label and blame and say, my mother did this, and this is what she did, and that is what he did, that's what dad did, that's not empowering. That's not empowering for a child. Okay, so take care of the inner child. Understand that childhood trauma is not necessarily something like abuse. Okay. In my practice, and I use this example a lot because for me it was an eye-opener. Trauma for one child whose dad would take his face and slam it into the table if he doesn't want to eat his breakfast, and trauma for another kid who was shown this on a soccer field, that trauma is the same. It had effects, bad effects, negative effects. Well, bad, negative, for lack of better words. But it had effects on both the children. Now, whose trauma was worse? If you ask them, they'll say it was equally bad. They can't compare, because trauma is trauma. Okay. So please, when you start addressing childhood traumas, when you start addressing family dynamics, frustration in the family, take a step back and start observing first. If you have time to observe, obviously, if there's family violence in the midst of everything happening, you can't observe because you have to react. But if that has happened to you, take a step back. What was happening in the family dynamic? Who was the perpetrator? Who did what? And just observe and go through it with a neutral neutral point of view. If you can go to the neutral point of view, you can actually do quite a lot of things. And you can actually start to understand that the system that you're a part of is actually bigger than just your family. Your family extends into the social structures surrounding you. Worldwide, it extends. And then when you start observing people when they get upset in boardrooms, in meetings, in behaviors, you start to see that most people act like teenagers when they get upset or when they get drunk. And you wonder, wow, haven't they sorted out that trauma yet? Childhood things that they might have perceived was accurate and they haven't questioned themselves. And then you take a step back and you ask yourself, how do I act in situations like that? How do I have the grown-up and the inner child communicate in harmony to just navigate through life? Then childhood trauma actually can be relieved and released quite effectively. Okay, sure. I see our half an hour is almost up. Time flew by again. Didn't feel that long tonight. If you have any questions, please jot them down in the chat. I'll just check quickly if anything comes up. But remember, trauma, you shouldn't label your trauma as good or bad or worse or better than somebody else's. It's your own experience. And ironically enough, we can all only relate to our own experiences. You cannot go into someone else's body, into their nervous system, into their perceptions and values and tell them, okay, I feel exactly the same. Okay. You can feel more or less the same, but not exactly the same. So if you deal with family dynamics, if you're struggling at the moment with difficult family dynamics, take a step back, observe what it is. Ask yourself, what is your role that you can play? What can't you do? When I was chatting to people last week, they went overseas and family stayed behind in South Africa, and the family in South Africa is now going through a tough time, and these guys are feeling guilty because they're overseas. And I'm like, no, take a step back. You had to go overseas. This was your choice. It was for you guys and for your own family and for your relationship. What can you do from that side and what can't you do? No, we can check in via Zoom or phone, via WhatsApp call or whatever. They've got the technology and we can just chat about it and be that supportive in that way. Okay, what can't you do? No, I can't jump on a plane and come fix problems aside. Okay, then your mind knows this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. Just do what you can do, and the rest is not up to you. The rest is up to the family dynamic and the situation, everything to balance itself out and as it plays out. So I hope that makes sense. It's usually something weird to think about and something funny to actually try and get your mind around, but it does work quite well if you can do that. And it does relieve a lot of stuff in family tensions and family dynamics if you actually just do what you can and you show up as your role. Okay. So I'll give a minute or two, just check if you have any questions. You're welcome to type it or just raise your hand or chat on the mic if you wish. Otherwise, thank you again for joining me tonight. These sessions, yeah, definitely I just want to hold them for half an hour because you don't want to have too much screen time. You spend most of your day on screen time in any case. But if you have any questions, as usual, you're welcome to contact me on my phone. Most of you are on the group, so you can just send me a personal message and I'll gladly answer. And then I hope you understand that your family dynamics, your childhood trauma, all these things are actually amazing feedback mechanisms if you can take a step back and not bring in the emotion, the blame, and the labels into them. And then they become quite interesting. Okay. So I see no questions. It's perfectly fine. Chat box. No hands up, no hands raised. Then you guys must have a brilliant evening. Minley, yeah, you're welcome, Minley. I hope it helped. I hope it made some sense surrounding family trauma and troubles and stuff. Because even Ram Das said, yeah, you think you're enlightened. Go spend a week with family. And I'm like, sounds about right. Think you're enlightened, peaceful. Go spend a week with family. All falls out the window. Okay, some single chats. Good. Understand my partner better. Yeah, Chantal, welcome. Monica, you're welcome. Excellent, guys. Then you must have a very good evening. And as usual, I'll put the recording on the group, maybe only tomorrow or sometime Friday when I have time to just edit it. Then you must have a peaceful evening and enjoy your role in this family structure. Okay. Cheers.